It turned out to be the coldest night Turner had spent in Maine so far, the kind of night that let him know that fall was pretty much wrung out and that deep winter was on its way to freeze the salt water out into the new meadows. Turner lay in his room, shivering even though he was still dressed, listening to the familiar sounds of his parents moving around in the room below him, coming up the stairs, closing the door, their quiet talk. He listened to the mantel clock chime the quarter hours and to the house tightening itself against the cold. He figured he would leave the house just at midnight, but he got so fidgety that he couldn't wait that long. And around 11:30, he crept downstairs, across the hall, into his father's study for the keys to Mrs. Cobb's house, back to the front hall, slowly turned the doorknob and opened the door. The air was so cold it rasped in his throat, as cold as a hardened heart. He sat on the top porch step, put his shoes on, shivered, and then set off down Parker Head for Mrs. Cobb's house. Arma virumque cano, he said to himself, and wished he had Aeneas's arms. He let himself in through Mrs. Cobb's back door, the door Lizzie had always used. Inside, only a faint starlight shone through the windows. He groped his way through the kitchen, down the hall, and to the front door, afraid to light a lamp, afraid to make a sound. Around him the house seemed huge, with rooms above and beneath him that he had never entered. Who knew what could be there? Who knew if Mrs. Cobb herself could be there, still trying somehow to get her last words right? Turner shivered, and not only with cold, though the Lord knew it was cold enough to shiver. His breath frosted the window and the door, and he stepped back, wondering if someone outside might be able to see him, or his breath. But outside, Parker Head was as quiet as the hall inside Mrs. Cobb's house. Turner went into all the rooms on the first floor, his hands held out in front of him to feel anything he couldn't see. And when he got to each of the windows, he held his breath and peered out, looking for whatever it was Willis had meant was coming, though he wasn't sure what he would do when it came. He figured if someone snuck up to the house and looked in on him, he could pretty well startle whoever it was into a faint. But what would happen when he woke up and found it was only Turner inside? He fumbled his way back to the parlor and reached around for the organ stool. He sat down on it, careful to keep his feet from the pedals. He let his fingers slowly stroke the silent keys, tapping out, "I have some friends before me gone." He didn't need any light to find the notes, and the feeling of something so familiar on his fingertips kept him from thinking about a ghostly Mrs. Cobb. He was in the middle of the third verse when he heard something upstairs creak 4 times, 4 separate times, and he knew that while he had been sitting alone in the dark, someone had come in. Maybe someone who knew he was there. Maybe even more than one someone who knew he was there.